E-Blockwatch founder, Andre Snyman, joins us now to discuss the Correctional Services Department's internal probe. A very good evening to you, sir. Grateful for your time. So the department will now, on top of everything else, look into allegations that Bester was able to, on multiple occasions, get in and out of the Mangaung Correctional Facility to enjoy weekends away with Dr. Nandi Pamakutumana. Not a surprising thing when you consider that even on social media, on TikTok, for example, you find inmates carrying on as though they're not incarcerated people.
Yeah, I find it absolutely a fascinating thing. For me, if you think of the prisons are cells of, they're hubs of individuals who are criminals and have criminal brains, and they have nothing to lose. So when they're sitting in there, especially long-term prisoners, they have nothing to lose. But the danger that they have is that they have this incredible communication with all the people that are, you think of the people leaving jail and serving their sentences. Now the guys in the inside that they know so well, they're now communicating with all of those ex-criminals out in the street. And so a lot of crime can be committed and coordinated in the hubs of the prisons. And so you've got so many cell phones and communication systems, as we've seen, in the prisons. And these guys obviously sit there, got nothing to do, and plan crimes. And we don't even know where we're looking, because these guys have got these like satellite criminals running around, and lieutenants. It's a crazy thing that the prisons cannot find out that there are prisoners with cell phones. And I've had phone calls from prisoners myself.
And Andre, when you and I last spoke, I think it was 2 weeks ago, you had detailed how someone had been in touch with you and believed that in fact seen Bester before the date of the fake death in prison, and what we now know was in fact an escape.
Absolutely. So I can tell you categorically that when Bester died, he died more or less on the 1st of May, if I can remember that it was the date. Within 7 days, we had a phone call from Bester. Not me, but the person that I'm dealing with had actually a phone call from the guy. We knew within 7 days that he was alive. From there, I went through to the magistrate's office in Randburg. I actually went and spoke to the investigating officer who was dealing with the arsonist. And I said, you know what, when we're finished with this arsonist, we're going to catch the Facebook rapist. It was like, I'd never said anything. So who do you tell? So I just think this might be a positive thing, that everybody is now concentrating and focusing on this problem that we have. And I hope this is going to get the guys at the top wide awake to the guys at the bottom, because I think there's a whole ecosystem in the prisons where the guys are trading with cell phones and airtime and all sorts of things like that. And they've got gangs on the outside. So it's a dangerous situation if you've got your control room inside a cell, in a cell.
And you make a good point about a dangerous situation, even on the outside. This was a rapist, a killer. Yes, the detail that's been published so far by the Sunday papers is that he was basically on romantic getaways while he was an inmate. But there's no telling what else he could have done to harm other people during that time out.
It's hugely dangerous. And you know what? The perfect crime is to be committed by a person that's incarcerated. You think he's in there and he's got an alibi. It's a crazy situation that this guy almost had a day pass, and you mustn't think that I sit there and I watch these guys talking in Parliament and this commission. They're all talking, focusing on that day that he escaped and how he escaped and he put on uniform. This guy had been in and out so many times. He'd practiced so many times to go in and out. I mean, the fact that they're focusing on that day is crazy. I can tell you that he was out in November 2021. He was at a place and he had at a restaurant where he had dinner with 2 ladies. I knew that in January. Then I knew it again all the way through. And he was in and out. We couldn't believe it ourselves. I was working with some investigative journalists, and I couldn't believe it. I said, this cannot be the case. But in hindsight now, it's all falling into place exactly what we believed. It was crazy situation. And the story is still unfolding.
And am I right to say what Bester also had working to his advantage was the fact that because he was incarcerated such a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, most people would not have a memory of him or would not be able to identify him, which would explain why he was able to move around so freely.
Correct. I think it's he was almost like the head boy there. You know, it's a crazy story. It baffles everybody.
What does that then tell us about correctional services and groups like G4S ability to keep other dangerous criminals in these facilities for the full term of their sentence without, as you were saying earlier, basically a day pass system where if you bribe enough people, you can actually go on a romantic getaway and be back in your cell on Monday?
I think that we must start looking at the positive here. I think it's been a huge embarrassment for the guys, for everybody that's that runs the show there. It must be hugely embarrassing. And wherever they go, even socially, they must get ripped off and embarrassed. So I think let's look at the positive here. I think that this is not going to happen too easily again. I think all of these systems, and there's so many other little systems that are floating around, and it's like, as I said, there's an ecosystem that's keeping a whole lot of people paid with a whole lot of privileges throughout the system. And I think this is maybe a time that we should actually reflect and say, great stuff, let's learn from this. This Thabo Bester has given South Africa another bad name, but let's go out there. We know now this is what happens, so let's close this net down. We know what happens.
Do you really believe, though, Andre, do you really believe that that's been, of this moment, this embarrassment, has been a big enough shock to the system, to the people who run these facilities, for them to make sure that they actually deal with prison corruption in earnest? Because, to be frank, it's not a problem that started with Thabo Bester. It's been going on for years in perhaps smaller ways, but it's always been there.
I think that this is the right time. You know, politicians only start doing stuff when there's an election coming around. And so we have an election coming around and the guys already got their backs to the wall, and this is definitely not going to put another feather in their cap. So I think, and I'm not political at all, I'm just thinking that if I was running the show, I'd start sweating now to think, maybe I'm going to get the boot. So I think that it's a perfect time for them to actually get something right. Gone are the days when the man in the street doesn't count anymore, because the margins are so close to keeping people in power and not in power. And I'm definitely not a political person, but I do think that you're going to see some action now, because they got the politicians have their backs to the wall, and there's going to be a mud fight out there because of situations like this.
Andre Snyman, good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight.